You doing, everybody? Man, I got a heavy weight on the channel today. Oh my God, man, let me tell you, I don't know who, but about, oh man, let's say 8 or 9 people told me I need to talk to this sister. I said, what? I'm talking about people from all over said you need to try to get with her, to interview her, because she is on it. She good. I said, okay, and I hit her up. So then I, check it out, my friends. First of all, y'all know I'm Anthony Brogdon, right? Y'all know who I am. I'm the guy that come up with these people and then try to ask some intelligent questions. So then what happened was I hit her up. She said, let me think about it. You know what she did? She vetted me. She had to check me out. She said, let me see who this man is. And I'm coming on strong. I'm coming on strong. This thing is really beginning to move. My subscribers are up. I know I get 4 or 5 of them a night now. I want 5,000 by the end of this year. We got to really move. Everybody tell 10 people just to hit the subscribe button. It don't cost no money. It don't ask no information. It just let me know you like me. How about that? Because I'm going to keep giving it to you the way I do. I'm going to keep finding these people, these experts, these people who love this history, who want to share it with you. I'm keep finding them. And then hit that like button. On a personal, not on personal, but on a couple notes, I'm having my own festival in 2022. Matter of fact, I'm having 2 of them. I'm having a festival in Quindaro, Kansas. Look up, I got a video on the channel where I interviewed a guy that said that the slaves got it from Missouri to Quindaro, which is in Kansas. Missouri was a slave state. Kansas was a free state. When they got there, they told them people, don't come over here looking to get us. We ain't coming back. So I'm having a festival there. Friday night, we're going to party. Saturday, we're going to tour the city and have a black picnic. And Sunday, we're going to have church service. You're going to want to come to this. I'm going to make sure that you're going to enjoy yourself. That's May 27th through the 29th, 2022. I'm going to have another festival. They already got this thing. They coordinated it now. I want 500 people to join me in Elaine, Arkansas, September 30th, 2022. And if you don't know the story of Elaine, they killed 300 or more black people because the black folks said, we tired of y'all taking advantage of us. And the man said, no, man, we want to keep doing it. He said, we tired of this. This don't make, we sharecroppers. We got some sense. We know this ain't right. And they shot some of them up in a church. If you haven't heard that story, there's a video on the channel about Elaine, Arkansas. Little known fact, we're going to blow it up. We want people to hear this story. And I'm going down there for a festival September 30th, that weekend. Watch me. Let me tell you some other things before I bring my guest on. And she waiting there, patient. She smiling. She said, come on, man, let me get it on. I said, hold on, wait one more second. Let me tell you some other good stuff. I'm a filmmaker, as you know, and this is one of my documentaries. I got 2 of them. Business in the Black, the rise of Black business in America. I'm telling you, slaves went to college. They say, how was that possible? Well, there were 3 HBCUs open before slavery ended. Now, maybe that's a play on words. They might not have been slaves themselves, but some of them did just come out of that. They just came out of that, man. You telling me I can't read and write? I'm going to figure out a way. I'm going to sneak. I'm going to put my life on the line to read and write. And you know how brothers and sisters are when we put our mind to something, we go to the highest heights, and then we go to college. There were enough of them to support a college. Cheney University in Pennsylvania was opened in 1837. Who you think going there? And that's a HBCU. Who you think going to Lincoln, and that's a HBCU? Who you think going to Wilberforce, and that's a HBCU? How about this? 2 years after slavery, Howard University had a law school. Who going there? after slavery. It's in my movie. Watch it. It's streaming on Amazon. Check that out. I'm so serious. I wrote this book. I got over 200 facts. I named schools that we went to. This one black guy, he built a raft and he taught people on his raft as they floated down the river. It's called Floating Freedom School. Serious stuff. It's in this book. All right. Check that out. It's over 200 facts. It's on my website, businessintheblack.net. I'm serious about it. And like I might have just told you, I wrote a movie script. It's called Foot Soldiers. It's going to be out in 2022. A 16-year-old black kid. I ain't making him no thug, but he do fight. He gets put out of the regular school from fighting too much. My man got a 3.7 grade point average. Well, he meets a mentor at the youth home. Watch for that. We shooting it probably in the next 3 weeks. It'll be out next year. I'm living my dream, everybody. And I appreciate you being a part of it. One more thing, two more things to my guests. I got people on here, a lady from Australia. I got a lady on here from Nova Scotia. I got a lady on here from Ireland. And all across America. I'm bringing this good history to you. And you know, the word I use a lot is the word strong. Strong stands for strength, tenacity, resilience, and a sense of oneness, nobility, and grace. And that's my introduction to the lady on the channel. She's a strong sister. Come on, introduce yourself. Let's get it on.
Okay, so my name is Diane Turner, and I'm the curator of the Charles L. Blockson Afro-American Collection, Temple University Libraries. And the Blockson collection.
Now, hold on, sister. I'm gonna interrupt you every now and then because things pop in my mind. You a doctor, aren't you?
Yes, a PhD.
Everybody, she's a doctor who did that PhD.
Yeah, and actually, I have 3 degrees from Temple University. Really? Undergraduate, I majored in art and anthropology, a master's from the Department of History, and a PhD from the Department of History.
Oh man, you've been there a long time. Now, are you from that area? Are you from the Philadelphia area?
Well, I was raised outside of Philadelphia, but going to school in Temple, I claim Philadelphia as one of my homes also. Okay, right now I live in Woodbury, New Jersey.
Now, let me ask you this. How you get so much smart? You did real good in grade school because you understood the importance of education. What motivated you to be this great?
Well, when I was working on my undergraduate work at Temple, I was fortunate enough to meet a historian who was in the history department who has since become an ancestor. His name was T. Clement Cato. He was originally from South Africa. And I took some courses in African-American history with them. And the more his courses that I took, I found that I was having a sense of pride, loving myself, loving my people, which turned into a universal love for humanity.
Right.
And so, you know, it basically fueled me. I said, well, if I can have this experience, so can other African Americans. And Dr. Cato, I was actually, when I finished my undergraduate work, I was going to go to the University of Pennsylvania, Wharton School of Business. And he said, no, we need you here. Oh, so I said, I stayed, and some days I was happy about it. Other days I wasn't, because it was a lot of work. But in the long run, it paid off.
Did your parents go to college?
Yes. Okay. My grandfather, actually, on my father's side, they were more college grads, but my grandfather, Edward Daniel Turner, was an early graduate of Hampton.
Oh, really?
And then my father, who was a Montford Point Marine, the first Black Marines, which served during World War II. When he came out of the military, he went to Temple too.
Oh, really?
So, yeah.
How did your grandfather get that to go to college? I mean, do you know that circumstance?
Well, he was at Hampton Institute. He lived in Virginia, and the family always instilled education in him. So he graduated there. He taught industrial arts there, and then decided to leave Virginia and come to Pennsylvania because there were opportunities for him here, and he settled here. And basically during the WPA, him and his partner, who he mentored, they were able to do a lot of building on what we call the main line now.
Okay. My grandfather, and a lot of story in this regard. We're gonna get to what you want to talk about, but just a little sidebar here. My grandfather went to college, great grandfather, and a lot of Black men, this happened to them, or Black women. After you got out of college, you couldn't get a job, so now you still doing some kind of mediocre work.
Well, my grandfather was a contractor, so he, was basically an entrepreneur. He worked for himself.
There you go.
And, really, if you look early on at the historically Black colleges, they did try to teach you self-reliance. And, if you go back and look at our history, really, that has been a major point of struggle for people of African descent. Even when you look at Ida B. Wells, when she starts writing about lynching, the lynchings were happening because of economics. Black men were making a way for themselves. And oftentimes people forget, like when you talk about the enslaved Africans, they had skills, like they brought skills here from Africa.
That's right.
And who do you think was doing all the labor?
That's right.
So, they had these skills. So, oftentimes you have to delve really deep,
that's right.
In South Carolina, rice wasn't able to be cultivated until Africans came and cultivated.
That's right.
And when you look at, they brought their labor, but they brought technological knowledge and cultural knowledge with them. And a lot of what we see today is built on what our ancestors were able to achieve in spite of the terror that they had to go through. Because when you talk about enslavement, it was a terrible thing. No one will willingly work from sun up to sundown with no pay.
That's right. Now, as we move up, just a couple more on yourself. When you growing up you grew up in Virginia, in that area?
Oh, no, I grew up in Malvern, Pennsylvania. I lived in Malvern, Pennsylvania. Then I moved to Media, Pennsylvania, then Devon, then Wayne. So, I was moving around a little bit, but it was all outside of what you would call the suburbs.
Yes. But my question is this, though. Was there Black history where you grew up? Was it?
Right. Did you hear any
stories?
There was Black history right in the house, with my grandfather and my grandmother. She passed when I was very young, but she taught, she was a teacher before they came up here in the North. And of course, it was very difficult for African Americans in the South who had the skills, like you said, credentials to get jobs in the North. So it was almost like coming up South because you had de facto segregation, which excluded African Americans from a number of occupations, not only in the South, but in the North too.
Let me ask you this. Okay, with her being a teacher, did you ever hear her say that I know they giving us inferior books? I gotta love my kids a little harder. I gotta go an extra length to make sure they get a good education because of this segregation and these inferior schools that they trying to put us through?
Well, by the time she comes north, she's not teaching. She's then, a housewife or anything. But, like historically, if you look at at the schools, um, the this the resources might not have been that good, but the Black teachers
Yes.
were usually higher quality sometimes than some of the white instructors, because
That's
they
right.
would have, degrees in other areas, but they weren't able to get jobs. So these teachers were very committed and very intelligent. So the Black schools, I mean, produced a lot of quality students,
Yes.
went on to the historically Black colleges and
Yes.
universities.
Yes. Now, as we move along, you've gotten these degrees and whatnot, and then now you do what? What you work at Temple doing what?
I'm the curator of the Charles L. Blockson collection, and basically what it is that I'm the steward of the collection. And Mr. Blockson is curator emeritus, and as a historian, I'm very glad to have a living founder. But just to give you a little history about the Blockson collection, then you'll understand what I do. He started collecting back in 1943. He was around 9 years old and was in a class and asked his teacher what contributions had Negroes made to American history. And in his
That's probably the way he asked it too, didn't he? He probably did say Negroes.
Right, because in the context of 1943.
Yep.
And in his memoir, which he has called Damn Rare, he said that his teacher was not a malice person, but her thinking was with the times. So she said to him, Charles, Negroes have no history and it's their place to serve whites. But however, luckily for him, he was raised in Norristown, Pennsylvania, in a close-knit community. His grandfather was there, his father and his mother. They all put an emphasis on education. His father got subscriptions to all of the Black newspapers, and his grandfather used to sing spirituals to him and talk about the Underground Railroad. Okay. So what that did for him was just, he left the class not feeling inferior, which, like if you don't know your history and you have that experience, it might make you feel inferior, but it motivated him to start collecting. So whenever he got any allowance or monetary gifts, he would be going out to bookstores, used bookstores, Salvation Army, wherever, and would purchase anything that had colored, Negro, Afro-Cuban, Afro-Brazilian, Jamaican, Ethiopian, Egyptian, you name it. And so at that time, because there was this myth being perpetuated in the larger society that there was no Negro history, he said sometimes he could go into a bookstore and not have enough money, and all he had to do was hide the book on another shelf and then come back later and would be able to purchase it. Okay. So he was able to amass a very large collection over time. And of course, when you're reading a lot, it inspires you to write. So he wrote some of the first books about the Underground Railroad in Pennsylvania, Philadelphia, and also African Americans in Philadelphia. But one of his treasured books that he found was on Walnut Street in Philadelphia. And it was in the Hurt book section. And for $1, he got a first edition of William Still's Underground Railroad.
Yes. He
looked in the book and found one of his ancestors in the book, listed Jacob Blockson, who had escaped from the eastern shores of Maryland, come through Philadelphia, then went up to Canada. So as he did more research, he also found that he was related by marriage to the Still family, and was very intrigued with Harriet Tubman. And so he started doing all this research on the Underground Railroad and wrote books on the Underground Railroad. And in fact, next week, October 7th at 2 p.m., we're going to be having a virtual public program with him live, and we'll be celebrating the 200th birthday anniversary of William Still. It's really exciting. So
yeah,
at any rate,
you're gonna boost that up. Now hold on, let me ask you this question now. Philadelphia played a unique role. It had slaves or it did not have slaves?
Well, we don't call them slaves. We call them enslaved Africans.
Yeah, but yeah, enslaved. I'm sorry.
Enslaved Africans. But yes, Philadelphia played a major role. What happened is, of course, this was where the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution and so forth were, because at that time, Philadelphia was the capital. And Philadelphia is right on the Delaware River. So a lot of slave ships would come in, and enslaved Africans would be taken off the boats and actually on auction blocks in Philadelphia and sold, and then end up in other parts of Pennsylvania or other places. But after the American Revolution, Philadelphia ends up having one of the most significant free Black populations. So you find out that the African Methodist Episcopal Church starts right in Philadelphia under Richard Allen. A number of things are happening here in Philadelphia. And so Philadelphia becomes very important. And Mr. Blockson was able to bring that out in his writings. But also in Philadelphia, it was a center for abolitionism.
Oh, really?
And so when you talk about William Still, he kept the records for one of the anti-slavery societies. And so his book is actually a record of those enslaved Africans who escaped and came through Philadelphia. He kept all the records, buried them in a cemetery, and then after the Civil War, he published it in 1871.
Okay, let me stop you. So you say he kept the records of who came through?
Right, the names, how they escaped and everything. So if you look in the Underground Railroad, the book, if you look in it, what it shows you is African agency, because many people don't realize that a major form of African resistance to slavery was running away. They would escape. Mr. Blockson would call them freedom seekers. They would liberate themselves. It was very dangerous. And everybody that tried to escape wasn't able to be successful. And the punishment, if you were caught, was very great. You risked your life, but that's how much freedom meant to these enslaved Africans.
Let me ask you this question. What would you think it was like to escape? You waited till the middle of the night, you told a couple people, you look for an opening. Is there a story of how somebody actually did it?
Yes. Even before, you have the Underground Railroad, there are volumes put together of what they call slave advertisements during the British or the colonial era. And in it, it had ads of those enslaved Africans who escaped. So there would be ads in newspapers because, of course, these slave holders wanted back their main source of labor. They looked at, and so if you look at these ads, it tells you a number of things, even down to the color of the socks that a person had on when they left. They would talk about, what they looked like, what they had on when they left, what skills they had. You can learn about the skills that these individuals had, whether they played any instruments or could sing and so forth. So, I would encourage you to try to look at the slave ads. But the one individual that I can give you a full story of course, is the book I told you about. And this was before the Underground Railroad, Oni Judge. And this is the book.
Okay.
My name is Oni Judge. And they were Oni Judge. I actually was introduced to Oni Judge, because Mr. Blockson, under this organization, the activist organization that came together, Generations Unlimited, were advocating and struggling for a monument to be put at 6th and Market Street. Because when the Liberty Bell was being moved to its current site, they found out that there was a house there where enslaved Africans resided. Unfortunately, what Mr. Blockson wanted did not happen, because he wanted a monument, something like what you see in New York, the African Burial Monument, which is beautiful. There is something down there at 6th and Market Street. It used to be called 6th and High Street, but it's not what Mr. Blockson wanted.
Yeah, sure.
So I ran across Oni Judge because one of the architectural teams who was going to put in a bid to actually create something on that site asked me to be their curator. So I got a book, a novel about Oni Judge that was written by a non-Black woman. And I think, she was trying to do Oni Judge service, but in it, she stated that Oni Judge was ambivalent about leaving Martha Washington. And it was like a spiritual thing happened to me, because I was working on something else and had no clue. But next thing I know, I'm writing, my name is Oni Judge. I took my freedom. There was no ambivalence about whether she wanted to stay with Martha because Martha was good to her, or whether she wanted to be free. She wanted to be free. And so the next thing you know, I'm writing down this script, and I talked to Mr. Blockson about it. He said, look, you need to develop this into a children's book.
Okay.
So I finished writing up the script. And of course, I used the Blockson collection to make sure it was historically accurate. And as a historian, this was my first children's book, but there was an urgency about getting Oni's story out.
Yes.
And so I wrote the script to it, and then I contacted a person who is also become an ancestor, who was a wonderful artist, Cal Massey. And if you Google his name, he was known for doing these beautiful images of African-American women, the African-American angels.
Yes.
And I didn't know him at the time, Mr. Massey. I contacted him. I said, Mr. Massey, listen, I wrote this script for a children's book. I would love for you to illustrate it. So he said, gave me his address and he said, come on by and drop it off. And I put what I thought the illustration should be.
So let me ask you this then, how did she escape?
Okay, well, what happened was, of course, George and Martha Washington were in New York. When Philadelphia became the capital, they moved to Philadelphia. And Oni was one of the enslaved Africans that was brought to Philadelphia. Now, Oni, another thing about Oni, the cook's name was Hercules. And oftentimes, Hercules was the one that people would focus on that escaped when he was in Philadelphia, because he did too. But guess who escaped first? Oni. And so myself as a Black woman, I said, like oftentimes we don't get the credit for what we do. So, it became even more important to me to tell her story.
Did she escape by herself?
Well, she left by herself, but this is what happened, because Oni and Hercules were trusted enslaved Africans. They were allowed to go out in Philadelphia by themselves, right? Okay. Oni was Martha's body servant, which meant she got her dressed and everything like that.
Oh, really?
And so Oni was able to connect with the free Black community, and they helped her plan her escape. And she was able to leave on a ship. She ended up in New Hampshire, Portsmouth, New Hampshire. And ultimately, Martha thought, somebody had kidnapped her or whatever. And later on, they found out that she was there. And this is the thing that's so interesting.
Yeah.
And it really tells you about how these enslaved people were not, the slave, non-intelligent individual.
Right.
Because one of George Washington's associates or relatives found her up there, and he let George Washington know, and George Washington sent a message to her to come back, right? And so she sent a message back to him saying she would come back under terms, and her terms were that if he wrote in his will that she would be free upon his death. Of course, he thought she was crazy, right? Here's this what he probably looked at as slave, trying to negotiate with me. But what Oni was saying is, like, she saw herself as his equal, right? Because she's trying to negotiate.
Okay, I got you.
She's a woman, she's a Black woman, but still, so that didn't happen. And she ended up living in Portsmouth until she died in her 70s.
So, okay, so
but,
let me ask you this.
Like at the end, at the end of the book, it says, like, listen, children, remember me when you talk about freedom, when you think about freedom. My name is Oni Judge, and I took my precious freedom. And so this is the thing that, as a historian, that was a revelation to me when I told Oni's story through this spiritual connection with her. And knowing that a major theme in American history is about freedom.
Sure.
And guess what? Some of the greatest stories about this theme come out of this enslaved community. So I told one story about Oni Judge, but there's hundreds of stories.
Oh, yeah. Let me stay on that story just a little bit more. So you think it might have been, and I know you probably can't approximate, let's say on a Wednesday, she leaves the house, Martha and George's house, telling them, hey, I'm going to get a dress or whatever I'm going to do to help you get dressed up. And then she doesn't do that. They get her on a ship to sail up the coast.
Right. Let me just, can I read a little bit?
Yeah, sure. That? Heck yeah.
It says in 1796, the Washingtons planned to travel back to Virginia.
Right.
A slave trade, right? So this is a quote that she says, whilst they were packing up to go to Virginia, I was packing to go. I didn't know where, for I knew that if I went back to Virginia, I could never get my liberty, end quote. I escaped one night in May 1796 when the president and Miss Martha were eating their dinner. My friends, the frees, Blacks and other, because the abolitionists were both Black and white, I should mention. My friends gave me some blankets to keep me warm. I disguised myself as a woman much heavier than I really was. They put me on a merchant ship named Nancy, heading further north. The ship was commanded by Captain John Bowles of Portsmouth, New Hampshire. I was very scared. I knew that if I got caught, the punishment would be horrible. I was terrified by the thought of being whipped, but my thoughts of freedom were greater than any fear of the consequences.
Yes.
And so it's fact, of course, I add something. So I'll just end here by saying, I was concealed in the hull of the ship for the entire trip, about 4 or 5 days. I was wrapped up in blankets, but was still very cold. I could not tell if it was night or day. The trip was rocky. I got sick. I wasn't sure if my sickness came from the excitement of getting closer to my freedom or the rocking of the ship. At times I felt like I was going to faint, but a voice inside said, hold on, Oni, freedom is near.
Dang, I love it. There's a story. Are you familiar with this story of Henry Box Brown?
Yes,
And who mailed himself in a box to Philadelphia?
Yes.
So
And the thing about it is, like you have all of these rich stories, about these enslaved Africans. And what it brings out more than anything else is that they wanted their freedom, like oftentimes in Hollywood, or stereotypical images, you see these enslaved Africans, they're on these plantations dancing around,
right,
eating watermelon, playing the harmonica, like they're happy
right,
to be enslaved, and they're not.
yeah, they always thinking. Now it seemed like Philadelphia was one of the first landing points for people to get there to when they did escape.
Yeah, and like I said, if you get the Underground Railroad by William Still, there's hundreds of stories of individuals who escape and come through Philadelphia. They help them there, and then they go further north, oftentimes to Canada or just further north. And you see, I don't know if you've seen the movie Harriet, where she actually was in Philadelphia, and her and William Still worked closely together. So yeah, there was a lot going on in Philadelphia.
Yeah, there was a lot going on. What's the Black neighborhood in Philadelphia that maybe a lot of them who did not keep going might have settled in?
Well, W.E.B. Du Bois did a book, really the first sociological study that was done on any group, called The Philadelphia Negro.
Okay.
And we have an original copy of that. And that particular area now, there were a number of things that happened. Urban renewal, which
the freeways or something like that,
like in other cities, and they force African Americans out of the eminent domain to move. But then the freeway didn't. It's that area now is called Society Hill. Okay. And it's a very expensive to live in that particular area of Philadelphia. But there, luckily, Mr. Blockson has placed historical markers all over the city of Philadelphia. He got a grant from Dr. Bernard Watson, who was president and CEO of William Penn Foundation. So even when you go to Society Hill today, you'll see historical markers where formerly free Blacks lived.
I love it.
And the one landmark that still remains, which is at 6th and Lombard, is Richard Allen's church. Mother Bethel is still in the heart of that community.
Yeah, they AME church. You hear a lot of stories of things that they did down in the South, educating formerly enslaved Africans and so on and so forth. What's your collection? Is it just and I don't mean just in no bad way, is it just books, or are there other things in the collection?
Okay, so I'll go back to finish the history now.
Yes.
So in 1973, Dr. Lawrence Reddick, before he went to the Schomburg, he was a professor in the history department at Temple, and he took a group of scholars to Mr. Blockson's home and made an appeal for him to bring his collection to Temple. Okay. Of course, it's early 70s, moving out of the civil rights into the Black arts and power movement, and students demanding, that the history be taught.
Sure.
So Mr. Blockson, it took him 10 years to decide to bring his collection to Temple in 1983. He brought his collection to Temple because Temple focused on diversity, and also the fact that it's in the heart of, which is changing a lot with, a lot of the cities are being regentrified.
Yes.
It was in the heart of a African-American community, and he wanted not only Temple students, scholars, professors and staff to have access to the collection, but also the community. So,
okay, let me stop you right there. Before he brought it there, did he use his house to invite people to come in and see it, or he just kind of had it there on his own? May I ask?
Sometimes he would maybe invite very few people. You know,
Yeah.
he might go on a presentation or do an exhibition or something. But, you know, Mr. Blockson's a very private person when it comes to his home residence. But he had a lot, you know, he had amassed, by the time he brings it to Temple in 83, there were 20,000 items in the collection. Today, we have over 700,000 items. And it includes, we have rare books. We have, if you've been to the National Museum of African American History and Culture
in DC,
we went down there for the opening with Mr. Blockson. And Mr. Blockson was invited to the opening because one of the things that happens before the museum opened is that Mr. Blockson was very close to Harriet Tubman's great niece, and she passed, and a lawyer contacted Mr. Blockson and told him that she had bequeathed him 37 personal items of Harriet Tubman. Ooh. So Mr. Blockson prayed on it and decided that those items he would donate to the National African American Museum of the Smithsonian, because Harriet Tubman was such an international person, you know, and of course, you know, the traffic down there is great, and she deserves. So if you go down there on display down on the lower level where it has slavery, there's a shawl on display that Queen Victoria gave to Harriet Tubman.
Oh, okay.
Right. So at any rate, so we have over 200,000 items, rare books, a lot of rare books by and about African Americans.
Yes.
We have sheet music. We have archival materials.
Okay.
We have manuscripts. We have posters. We have African art.
We have, I love it.
Art.
I love it.
We have every really. It's like a one-stop place because Mr. Blockson was collecting everything.
Yes.
We have African American history and culture, the African diaspora. We have African history, all of it. And so when people come in here looking for one thing, we can also let them see other things.
That leads to my next question as we kind of come to a close. People can come there. You can't check the book out, but you can sit there at the desk and read the books, or how do y'all handle that?
Okay, well, we're a special collection. We're open 9 to 5, Monday through Friday. And as a special collection, we don't circulate our books. And in fact, we're part of the library system, the Charles Library. And oftentimes people, if something's checked out in the Charles related to African Americans, they can come to our collection because we don't circulate our materials.
Right.
But you can sit in there all day, every day. And the key word is FREE.
Right.
Gaining knowledge in the Blockson collection doesn't cost you anything.
I got you. Have y'all digitized some things?
Yes. One of our well-used collections, I don't think I mentioned photographs, but we have over 200,000 negatives and photographs that were actually taken by a guy by the name of John W. Mosley. We have some of those digitized. We have some of our sheet music digitized, and we have other materials.
I love it.
It's an ongoing project. We also have some of our oral history interviews that have been digitized.
Oh, really?
Yeah, we actually have a oral history project that's going on right now, where we're interviewing, conducting oral history interviews with former and current long-term residents of North Philadelphia, right where we live. And we have something coming out very soon sometime between October 18th and the end of October, we got a grant from the Pew Foundation, and we put together a graphic novel. And our curator, which you should probably have him on, Eric
Yes.
Battle.
Okay.
It's entitled Black Lives Always Mattered, Hidden African American Philadelphia of the 20th century. And
Okay.
we profile 14 individuals.
Okay. Everybody, I told you she gonna blow your mind, and she did. She did mine, because she and the catch is, at the end of the day, we wanted more. We wasn't selling for that enslavement. It was never a happy moment. Now, there were a few people that probably said, "Hey, this isn't a bad thing. You know, my man not treating me so bad. I get my 3 square meals and so on and so forth." But
No,
you
that's
can't
a
be satisfied
stereotype.
with that.
No, Anthony, that's a stereotype.
That's the
I doubt if
moral
any of them were
story.
doing that.
Everybody hit the subscribe to the channel. That's free. It don't cost nothing. Don't give you no information, but just let me know you like me and you like what I'm doing. Hit the like button on this video, because I know she told you some things, and you need to check her out at that museum. Are you a museum?
No.
What do you call it?
No, we're a special collection.
A special collection. Check them out at a special collection. Meet her. She got some things she'll share with you for the 5 minutes she can stand there. And you know, let's support this cause. Let's keep it going. And to you, I say, with all sincerity, that I want you to stay strong, stay safe, stay on your grind. I love that you're so smart that you are, and you decided to use your skills for the betterment of the community, to preserve that history. Temple loves you, and I'm sure all them people around the Philadelphia area and everywhere know how great you are. Keep it going.
All right.
Godspeed. Everybody, we out. Till next time. Thank you.
Take care.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.